Second, the role of technology. As the Cold War was winding down and the war for the Greater Middle East was heating up, leading members of the U.S. national security elite persuaded themselves that technology was transforming the very nature of war. Fast computers and precision-guided weapons promised to enhance by orders of magnitude the efficacy of force. Since technological superiority is ostensibly an American strong suit, this high-tech approach to warfare promised to endow U.S. forces with a decisive edge against any and all adversaries. Well, the United States has now fully tested that proposition, captured in the phrase shock and awe. Except in the narrowest tactical terms, it has proven to be utterly false. In the Greater Middle East, the preferred American style of warfare possesses limited utility. It works only when our adversaries agreeably choose to fight on our terms, as, for example, Saddam Hussein did in 1991 and again in 2003. And yet, even then, operational success did not translate into conclusive political success. The Pentagon's belated response to this problem, for example, imbuing troops with a modicum of cultural sensitivity prior to their deployment, offers an example of too little, too late. It's also at odds with the prevailing ethos of the American military profession, and therefore represents little more than a gesture. The self-image of the United States military, high-tech warrior professionals who in smiting evildoers advance the cause of freedom, might be well suited to doing battle against Nazis or commies. But it's entirely inappropriate for the tasks that waging the war for the Greater Middle East requires. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld once touched off a minor furor by remarking that you go to war with the army you have, not the army you might want. 30-some years into the war for the Greater Middle East, the army we have has yet to adapt itself institutionally to what fighting that war entails. And by no means does the officer corps' passing flirtation with counterinsurgency invalidate that statement. In recent years, the missile-firing drone has emerged as the latest excuse to avoid thinking seriously about war. Those who preside over the United States military are still today held in thrall by the prospect of devising technological solutions to war's enduring challenges, even as they dodge the question that Rumsfeld posed several years ago. Are we killing more terrorists than we are creating? The refusal to confront this question represents an intellectual and a moral failure of the first order. Third, strategy. In present-day Washington, strategy has become a lost art. Let me define the term so you know what I mean. Strategy is the principled application of power to achieve objectives of first-order importance. Strategy implies something more than mere opportunism, and something more than military action, either threatened or undertaken. Any strategy worthy of the name sees around the curve. It anticipates, or at least can accommodate, the unexpected. Strategy expands the range of plausible and affordable options. In short, it creates choices. What passes for U.S. strategy in the war for the Greater Middle East has done just the opposite. It has circumscribed choice, fostering the sense that the United States has no alternative but to press on, vaguely hoping that persistence will produce a different result. But whether we are talking about Ronald Reagan sending the Marines back to Beirut for a second stab at peacekeeping, or Barack Obama surging more troops into an Afghanistan war already 8 years old, simply trying harder has seldom produced happier results. Worse, with few exceptions, Washington's conception of strategy has been almost entirely reactive. The major exception being George Bush's preposterous post-9/11 scheme to transform the Islamic world. Further, those responsible for formulating basic policy have repeatedly failed to anticipate second-order consequences, with the Iraq War as Exhibit A. Now, during the Cold War, the United States made many costly mistakes. In that regard, Washington's lamentable post-war infatuation with nuclear weapons led the pack, with the Vietnam debacle trailing not far behind. But that said, the concept of containment, devised in the late 1940s, did provide at least a basic framework for sound strategy. 30-some years after it began, we cannot make a similar statement regarding America's war for the greater Middle East. And yet, feasible strategic alternatives do exist. What, for example, endowed the Persian Gulf with such huge importance in the first place? Easy question. It was the concentration of world oil reserves in that region. More than any other single factor, it was oil that prompted Jimmy Carter back in 1980 to set in motion the train of events that produced America's war for the greater Middle East. But what if, as appears to be the case, the United States stands on the brink of something approximating energy self-sufficiency? Should that not affect the reigning perception that the American way of life is somehow tied to the fate of Saudi Arabia and its oil-rich neighbors? Shouldn't that create options? It should. But thus far, policymakers seem oblivious to that possibility.